So here's my thoughts on advertising, and this is just how I see it. Um, what frustrates me is when I find a podcast and it's a good podcast, and you start listening, and then over time you just see more and more advertising come in, and it's frozen seafood, it's like fresh meat, and it's like what was kind of an entertaining opportunity for a podcast turns into 15 minutes of the podcast, and it seems like the advertising has overtaken the podcast. That's my concern.
So you don't want that?
I don't want that.
You don't want that corporate money?
Well, and there again, I'm willing. It's like, that's why I asked the question, what's the advantage to it? Because is there an advantage? I know there is when, I'm hearing, these big time folks, but at the same time, there's also a part of me that says, okay, we're not there yet.
Yeah.
And yet so to talk with me through the whole business end, I'm open to that discussion.
Well, so I think at the scale we're at, and for whatever that foreseeable future is,
53 audience.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, that's pretty good.
Is it? I wouldn't know. That's why I'm
53
saying
53 more than we have.
That's right. Welcome to How I See It with me, Mark Pratt, and
Justin Sternberg. This is a podcast that works to counter cultural polarization through thoughtful conversations. At the scale we're at, I doubt there's going to be, much benefit in terms of what, income back to us. Maybe there's you're setting a precedent, or maybe there's value in that. I don't know. I feel like the value there is pretty low, but maybe there's something to saying, hey, this is a thing that will be part of what we're doing. I think long term, it helps to, like when all the fun starts drying up, or it becomes more work.
I gotcha.
The additional income could potentially help, right? And also can help us pay for a better mic stand instead of this blue tape monstrosity.
I like the blue tape, but like you say, it does. Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know how many ads it would take to get us a new mic stand, but
probably get a few.
It'd probably be a few.
Yeah.
Unless there are 53 listeners listen like 10 times each, maybe we'll get there sooner.
There you go.
So if you guys could get on that, you could really use a new mic stand.
But the sound is good. You've done a nice job.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. I mean, I'd like to take credit, but I don't really tweak the sound. It's just, it's a good mic.
Yeah.
Mic's pretty good.
Yeah.
Stand not so much.
Maybe it's the blue tape.
That's gotta be it. That's where the magic is.
Exactly. It's kind of a buffer.
Although we didn't have the blue tape the first couple shows.
That's true. And it may have shown.
That's true.
But yeah. I mean,
what kind of profit do you want, Mark?
Well, and that's where I'm at. It's like, sure, like the old country, like the country song, a little more be all right. You ever heard that? Yeah, a little more be all right, but it's like everybody's fed, everybody's clothed, that kind of thing. And I don't want to necessarily become something different.
Yeah.
For the sake of the dollar.
Yeah. Here's a question for you. Are there podcasts?
You sure you shouldn't be recording this? No.
I am.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
ABR, Mark.
ABR. Okay. I thought you shut that one off. I didn't realize we segued. Now a new chapter.
Changed my mind. Yeah.
That's okay.
The question for me is there a podcast that you listen to where there's ads where you're like, where they add credibility? Does that make sense? Because I think that's for me. I think that a potential thing.
For me, most of the ads that I hear, it's like, it's not. Well, here's like, can you mention other podcasts on a podcast without?
Let's try it.
Okay. Relatable.
Okay.
Allie Stuckey. Lizzie listens to her, and I get, she's good, and she's really good. And it's like, but then all of a sudden in the middle of this is this fresh beef market, and it's like, I just don't see that person,
Yeah.
I don't always see the connection. It's like that person
Yeah.
doesn't strike me as a cattle ranching type person. But then again, she's out of Texas. It could very well be very
Yeah.
applicable. But it's like, yeah, I guess it's just, that's what I look at. It's like, I don't, did she just want some fresh beef one day and said, wow, I'm going to contact this company? Or is it a matter of the other way around?
Right.
And now I'm putting this out here, and it's like they send me my steaks for free,
Yeah.
but now I'm advertising them.
Right.
And it's like, that's the part that I guess I just don't think of anything that I can endorse necessarily that I'm currently using. But I realize
everything's that bad and that you use.
No. Well, shop at Walmart and Aldi's, so it's like they already have those markets.
Yeah.
So why would they need a further market? But I also realize I've thought about it, in all honesty, as Chris and I think about, Sparrow's Nest, that kind of thing, and what's up next for us, we're selling eggs now, and it's like, there may be a time where it's like, goat's milk, that kind of thing, beef and that kind of thing. But it's still that's part of who we are becoming. You know what I mean? So it's not necessarily,
that would be an interesting new podcast ad. Selling eggs. Like, if
right
you're
now,
local.
Right now, even at 53, I don't have enough eggs to keep up.
For our 53 listeners.
With our 53 listeners. Yes.
The thing about that beef ad, to me, it's obvious to me that it's just an ad.
Yes.
And so for me, once those ads become that way, there's kind of a clean separation between, okay, I know this is the business end of the podcast, right? Like, get this done, get back to what you're saying. I don't put any credence into that ad based on you being a part of it.
No, I hear you.
Now, there are a lot of podcasts that have ads where the hosts record something about the product.
Yep.
And they're generally pretty kind to the product.
Sure.
And it's very difficult to know, do you like this product because you got it for free and they're paying you to have this conversation, which I don't think that's a bad thing either. I just want to know, like, is this a good product or not? And it's hard to know based on that ad.
Would you have purchased a Sleep Number bed?
Right. Exactly.
Just because you want a Sleep Number bed.
Yeah.
That's kind of the thing.
Yep. But here's the thing. No, probably not.
Right.
But if they called up and said, we'll send you a Sleep Number bed, all we want you to do is sleep on it. If you like it, if you feel good about it, we'd love for you to mention it on your podcast, whatever.
Yeah.
Would you do that?
Right.
Would you?
I kind of like the mattress I have right now. I'll be honest with you.
What if you really like that Sleep Number bed?
I would probably be willing to try it. But see, here's the other thing. If I didn't like it, then I'd have to be able to say that, no, this is a lousy thing. And granted, there goes that.
Would you, is that what we would communicate to them? I would communicate that.
That's what I would. I mean,
like,
here again,
are you willing to get a review either direction?
Yes, that would
for
be
this free bed.
Like, does it keep my feet warm at night?
Right.
Okay, yeah, it does that well. Does it adjust? Do I feel it adjusts well to my body? Nah, I'd just soon have my old, whatever microfoam, or what's the memory foam foam topper. I miss my memory foam topper and whatever, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I understand where you're coming from too. It's a marketing thing.
I'm not coming from anywhere. I'm asking.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. Well, I understand the separation. Don't get me wrong. And I guess, and here again, whether it's a podcast, whether it's television, the advertising is the part that just frustrates me.
Yeah.
Because I'm into the story. I want to know. I'm impatient.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I wouldn't necessarily say that, but it's like, I guess I'm at a point where I'm frustrated by advertising
Mm-hmm.
because it seems as if it is, as a thought, it seems as if it's invading more and more of my life through, even the limited Facebook that I even do,
Right. Yeah.
that I think that's the overarching thing is like,
yeah. And a big part of that is because of the free culture, right? Like,
yeah,
Facebook's free. These podcasts are delivered to you free. Like,
yep,
there's a lot of things that are free, but they're not, right? Like, they're paid
yeah,
somehow. And
yeah,
I think at where I'm at in my life, it's just become an understood part of what we have, right? Like,
yeah.
it
It's a part of the
understood.
culture.
It's the trade-off. I don't have to pay for the subscription to this podcast, but I'll pay for it with those ads, and I can fast forward them or whatever, and
Yeah,
and I'll do that when I can, and when I can't, I annoyingly listen or whatever.
yep,
And like for me, I've just accepted it.
yeah,
That being said, again, I don't have an opinion about whether we should or shouldn't. I think it's interesting to have this conversation, and I would love if we could not do it. Like,
yeah,
that would be cool if we could just say
right,
we're a podcast that doesn't do ads. So what does that mean?
yep,
Click here if you want to support us or whatever. Or
yeah.
maybe that's an ad. I don't know. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Click here if you want to support us.
Sure. Or
Yeah, I guess,
promoting certain ways to support us, or
and here again, that would be where I'd come back and say, do we need support at this point? And because I mean, I think a week, we can pull that out of what we're currently doing. Would it be nice to be able to pull back, to be able to have a resource to, add to, so that you can simplify a little more instead of doing this and three other things,
yeah,
I suppose
yeah.
there's something to be said for that.
Mm-hmm.
But
like if there was an opportunity for this to be career,
mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously, I know what you got going on with other things, but if you're able to put one of those things aside, right?
Yeah.
One of the 12 things Mark does, he's like, I think this 12th thing I'm going to trade for
Yeah.
podcasting because it can support, me and my family. But, obviously, at that point, something's got to, money's got to be coming in somehow, right?
Exactly.
So that would be the question. Do you see that kind of potential?
I get you.
B, desire, like something that you would aspire to, and it's
Sure.
an interesting prospect. And C, at that point, what does it look like?
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm not sure I've developed all A, B, and C.
Sure.
Is it something that would be cool if it happened? Sure. Am I putting my eggs in that basket?
Right.
Probably not.
Yeah.
I mean, this is great. I enjoy the time. I enjoy the opportunity. And the neat thing, I think part of it for me, is the more we do this, the more I'm mindful of what we put out.
Yeah.
The stewarding of the time, other people's time, is what we put out valuable.
Yeah.
And I think that in some ways is counter to the advertising part for me. Is it seems as if it cheapens, that's the word I'm going to use at the moment without a better word, what we're putting out there, because we've made it convoluted to a certain degree.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it comes back to where, if this can take off and do something kind of on its own, and I realize that there again, that's a part of who I am, something out of nothing, miracle type thinking. But I'm not saying that can't happen, but I also realize that's not the typical model,
Yeah. And I think it could happen. I don't think it's a matter of can we make something out of nothing, because I believe the two of us have what it takes, assuming nothing tragic happens, that we could do it. I believe we could build it. I believe that's true. What I think the difference is growth. I think the difference is, opportunity. I think the difference is time. If we have the resources, what more can we do? How much more quickly can we grow it, or introduce it to more people and whatever. That to me is the difference.
So in that, help me understand, because I realize you are very generous when it comes to putting Mark Pratt and Justin. When I realize this is part, in all honesty though, this is something you've invited me into based on a dream or a desire on your part that I might not have had. But after hearing your heart, your desire, it's like, yeah, we can do this and I'm willing to be a part. But I mean, in all honesty, I would need help understanding how that can be made in the process, because I think you have more of a fundamental understanding than I do.
Yeah. I mean, I work on the internet, so
exactly.
Yeah, so that's a big part of it. Well, I mean, I work on the internet, but I also read a lot by creators. So there's this whole genre of creators online, and that can be YouTube creators.
Okay.
That can be bloggers. Yeah. That can be podcasters. That can be thought leaders. This huge genre, right, of people who create and they use the internet as their forum, right?
Sure.
And one thing that is generally true, I would almost say universally true, is if you keep working at it, the audience will be built. You know what I mean? Because it's hard to even explain, but as long as you care and as long as you're putting effort into it and as long as you're consistent, you will find an audience. The world is that big. And the internet is that big that the audience will come. And 53, we have 53 listeners, maybe more today, maybe 54. That seems like a lot to me, but of course it's not. It's a drop in the bucket.
Right.
And right now we're tapping into our, local,
sure.
people that know us, right? Eventually it will grow, and it will grow to people we don't know.
Gotcha.
If we care to just keep producing and be consistent and publish on a regular basis and promote it wherever we can, that kind of thing.
Sure.
It will grow. And then you put even any amount of effort into it, whether it's advertising, in other words, advertising us elsewhere.
Sure. I gotcha.
Or cross promotion with other podcasters, whatever that, like, put any amount of effort into it. Like, it
just
will
to increase that
exposure,
influence, if you will.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I hear you. No, and that in itself, I think it is that aspect of the consistency.
Yes.
Just continuing to do the thing that you feel passionate about doing. I can understand that. Because I'll be honest, that part of me that says, okay, there are how many podcasts would you say are out there?
I just heard the figure the other day, and it was like, why are we doing this?
And see, and it's not that I'm there, but when I think about it from a numbers perspective, it's like, let's be, I'm just going to be honest and transparent to that degree. I'm sure there are people out there who began like we did, or we have, and it's like, with this amount of effort, and they've put all the effort in, and they've tried to resource, and yet their listenership has not necessarily increased. It's gone the other direction. And I don't even necessarily who I am. I don't even necessarily like to talk like that, from a negative
Yep.
growth perspective.
Well, that's reality, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
No, I am not saying it's impossible for us to fail.
Okay, I hear you.
That's not what I'm saying. I guess what I'm saying is, with the amount that we care right now, I don't believe will fail. I believe there's a certain amount of effort, a certain amount of, I guess if we're terrible, right? Like there's a certain amount where you just can't compensate with hard work, right?
Sure.
But I believe very strongly in hard work. And most of the stuff that I've read over the last 20 years has been about how hard work trumps talent.
I hear
right.
You.
And so that's kind of where I'm coming from, barring a lack of hard work, a lack of passion, or something tragic, or just change of heart, and we just don't care about it as much as we used to, and we don't, we kind of barely show up, or we do our best, but our best is just not that great, right? Then I absolutely believe it could fail or just not grow like we think.
I like that other use of the word. It's like it wouldn't be a failure,
right?
As far as I'm concerned, to having had this time.
I agree. Yeah.
And in the podcast world, it would no longer cease to exist type thing, But I appreciate you sharing from that perspective, because that's where that's probably more where I'm at. And at times I respect your experience there.
Sure.
Because, as others have listened or will continue to listen, you are the technical dynamic of this podcast.
But you're the brains.
Well, no, I'm just the other chair.
It's an important other chair, Mark.
Okay, I'm happy to be. I'm happy to be the other chair.
I mean, I listen to our podcast, Mark, and the parts I like. It's the part where Mark's talking. I'm like, this guy's got something going on. I like this guy. I should follow this podcast. And then I show up. Well, it's a good thing this other guy's on this show.
It's a good thing Justin has heart. Justin has heart.
And the technical skills.
The technical skills.
Yeah. Oh, man.
No, but either way, but so much more than that. Yeah, I do value that insight, I guess. It's not just a technical end. It's the intelligence. I do.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
Well, I'd prefer the word wisdom over intelligence, because I know I'm just not that smart. Well, but I've learned a few things, sometimes by the wrong methods. But
I mean, this is the whole topic. What's the difference between smart and intelligence and wisdom? But I think wisdom generates intelligence. I mean, wisdom.
Sure.
If you have wisdom, you don't need quote unquote intelligence, because it's implicit.
But it doesn't hurt.
You're right. What you said about failing made me think of this recent article I read on Farnham Street blog, which is a really interesting blog that I follow.
Two mindsets.
Yeah, two mindsets. It's basically the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. And the fixed mindset is like
fixed. Rigid.
Yeah. But when you feel like your opportunities are limited, right?
Yeah. I was thinking of that scarcity.
Yes. Scarcity mentality.
Mindset.
Yeah. Scarcity mindset. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the growth mindset is kind of the opposite of that, where the scarcity mindset is like, oh crap, I got to get what's mine. It looks like it's disappearing. I got to grab it, or whatever. And it looks at failure as just that, like I missed out.
Yeah.
I failed. Where the growth mindset is very much about looking at failure. And you talked about, I don't think this would, you wouldn't feel like this was a failure if we ceased to record.
Sure.
And I agree completely, because I mean,
you have a growth mindset.
That's right. I have a growth mindset, Mark. But no, absolutely. I believe in that idea of like, this didn't produce nothing,
Yeah.
Even if no one got anything out of it, for between the two of us, it certainly has been kind of eye-opening and fun.
Yeah.
Enjoyable.
And I think part of that is what I was coming back to. The opening mind part is to realize how, I think when you think about it from the two mindsets, scarcity and what was the other one? Oh, growth.
Mindset,
yeah. That opportunity to be able to say, okay, I can still learn from this experience, and I'm growing through it. And it may not have matched my expectation, but yet something occurred and it was valuable. And yet I want to recognize my desire from, if I may, my growth perspective is I want it to be valuable. I want this time to be valuable to everyone who invests their time to
Yeah.
listen to us.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, you know, things that I've become more aware of since doing this, it's like our words are important. You know, they're nuclear. It's not that what goes out just stops when the wave stop, sound wave stops. You know, and so I want to be promoting value in what we do. And that's not to say that we can't have fun. It's not that everything, and, you know, my family's biggest concern is that I could become heady, you know, and so every session
See?
is
Intelligence.
no, it's just me telling the same old story over and over again, thinking it has important to somebody's life. But no, but to the point of recognizing, finding that balance of entertaining, fun, informative, and still beneficial to some degree, offering hope, you know, offering small insights over a time that say, okay, yeah, this is a valuable resource. This is a good use of my time. Yeah, is every episode going to be stellar? I think that's the part where I wrestle with. It's like, no, likely there's going to be some flops that we record and we put them out there.
Yeah.
You know, because it seemed important at the moment, but
see, I in response to that,
yeah, fire away.
Well, first of all, I agree. I
Okay.
agree. The thing that I take issue with, and take issues too strong,
Yeah, but I'm good with it.
Pressure. Because I don't know that I'm convinced in and of myself that I can produce value that often, that regularly, and that consistently for our listeners. I think that is a little beyond my capabilities to control.
I hear you.
But what I believe is that I don't believe when we talk that it's worth nothing, no matter what the conversation is. Because again, especially with the specific idea behind the podcast, when we talk about the things that we maybe don't agree with, but talk about it in a simple way that produces some different perspective in each of us, that's valuable. You know?
Yeah.
It's valuable for oops.
Hey.
Hey, we have a soundtrack now.
Exactly.
I bumped the play button on my my music. So, but anyway, so yeah, that's the thing that gets me a little like squirrely. Is like, oh crap, Mark wants us to produce value every time we. Oh man, I think he's got the wrong co-host here.
No, and I'll tell you exactly where that comes from. For me, I think as a therapist, that's behind. I'll be as an expectation when people come into my office. It's like at the end of that 50 minutes, my desire is to have created an opportunity to where the resources they give me are, even if not more so in their favor, that they have received far more than they've spent.
Yeah.
That's my hope. That's what drives me as a therapist, because I want to be a steward.
Yeah. Well, I know some of our people are listening while they're mowing the lawn, so they're not giving us a whole lot.
Yeah, and that's okay too. I think that becomes a part of my growth and my learning.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I'll be in that, as we think about which podcast we're doing next or what we want the next podcast to look like. That's the part that I wrestle with most.
Yeah.
Because, and that's the concern my family has in that, is like,
the same concern or the inverse concern where they're
no, it's the same,
like that we do something of value.
No, that, in other words, their concern is that I get so caught up in the value.
Right. So their concern is the inverse of yours. Your concern is the value. Theirs is that you're going to put too much stock.
Their concern is the same perspective as yours.
I got you.
That it doesn't get heady.
Yeah.
Each time because I'm concerned about having value and life transformation and insight given. And granted, I can back away from that in such a way, but I'll be honest, when we talk about fun, it's like, okay, where's the meat in that? That's kind of my perspective. But I also have to realize that, for podcasts to have, value, I think you have to have that balance to where, and that's not to say that we can't bring humor and lightness to heavy topics as well. We could talk about, ideally, probably we'll talk about depression, but can we, talk about that in a way that adds some humor, that adds some levity? And I think that's what, there's just a lot that I'm starting to think about as the way we interact with other people. And even now, it's like, I'm still surprised. This is just personal.
So let me pause you real quick. Remember what you were going to say there. Okay?
Yeah, sir. No sweat. Yep, I got it. I got it.
We're specifically talking about the fact that we just hit publish, right? So we've recorded some in the bank, and we've been waiting for this day, get some stocked up for the day that we hit publish. And I don't think either of us really kind of knew what that would look like in terms of audience or, feedback or whatever. But we hit publish last Wednesday, and then yesterday, the second one went live. And it's been really cool and just interesting to hear people say, I listened to your podcast. You're like, oh, you listened? Like, wow, what did I say? It's brought some different thoughts, some different perspective to how I see it.
Exactly.
All right, so back to what you're saying.
That's exactly what it's like I'm honestly surprised when someone I know comes up to me, and instead of saying, "Hey Mark, how are you doing?" the first words, "I heard your podcast." And it's like, there's a part of me in my head, it's like, my podcast? Do I have a podcast? It's that fresh. It's like a podcast. Oh yes, that thing that Justin and I do on Wednesday mornings now.
So Mark has been Googling how to ward off the paparazzi. He's really concerned about the level of fame.
I'm not that concerned, but I'm still surprised. It's that new to where that's the last thing, even the other evening at Ultimate, I had a young guy come up and say, "I heard your podcast."
Cool.
And he honestly said, "You and Justin seem to have a good rapport, and I liked it." And it's like, wow, that's a 20-something that liked our podcast. Okay, Justin is right. We can make this happen. No. But I think, and for me, that is encouraging. Now, will that 20-something continue to listen at episode 10, episode 15?
Hey, 20-something, are you listening?
So there again, we had, you folks will really appreciate this. We actually had a moment where IT guy Justin Sternberg said, "I hate computers." Maybe not quite at that volume, maybe not quite with that intensity, but
there was a little more hate in my voice, but
vitriol. But at that point, we were talking about having influence. And
we lost another segment, just so everyone knows. The recording stopped. Apparently we're still newbies at this podcasting thing, so
we need bells and whistles that go off when recording stops, and that way we know to stop talking.
Well, I switched the pattern, right? We've been recording it on my phone.
True.
And today I said, let's record it on my computer on the website, and it stopped right at 30 minutes and 1 second. So I think maybe there's a limit there that I didn't know about that doesn't exist.
Maybe they're trying to conform us.
Right. Maybe they're injecting ads while we're waiting. No, this is where you're supposed to put ad. No, I don't know. Anyway, you were about to talk about the 20-somethings and.
Well, we talked about the influence and the pressure that it seems, and I think we continued that process to be able to recognize you had the two mindsets. Did you want to review those?
Yeah. Well, so right. So we were talking about the concern of having value with every episode and just making sure that it has value, and it makes me think of, or at least it made me think of the first time we talked about this, the paradigm or the analogy in the book 7 Habits for Highly Effective People, where he talks about the difference between the circle of concern and the circle of influence. And so what he says is basically everybody has a circle of concern. Everyone cares about a certain number of things in this world, whether it's who's the president at this time, or whether the fact that Russia's attacking Ukraine, or whether social media is out to get us all, or whatever it is. Like there's certain, or and we also care about like our school or our state or whatever. And those are all things that reside in our circle of concern. But we also have a much smaller circle within that circle called the circle of influence. And those are the things within our realm of influence. Those are things that we actually have access to be able to influence through one means or another.
Sure.
And I know you asked, like, how do you get that influence or whatever, right?
The difference between influence and control is what I was asking about. Because I think we can get those two mixed up at times. And, I'd go ahead as far as now you fully understand where I was coming from with that question. But
Well, because we talked about how it is an important distinction to make and not to misconstrue influence with control, because while I might have someone's ear, it doesn't mean I can control what they're doing, or should.
Exactly.
Of course, and but yeah, just the fact that we have an opportunity to influence others is important. And what does influence look like? Well, it looks like someone who's willing to listen to what I have to say in one manner or another, or maybe they're not willing to listen to what I have to say, but they have to because they're within earshot.
Sure. It's like your kids in the car on vacation.
Yeah, exactly.
Captive audience.
They have to hear you sing, every song.
There you
go.
They
have no choice. Exactly that. And with this podcast, I guess that would be my concern.
I hear you.
Is that we would put too much pressure to control our circle of concern. Like every listener gets value when we just don't have that guarantee of the influence.
Sure.
But they're here, right? And so, but what we do have control over is the conversation and what we're able to talk about. And that's why I very much value your perspective on let's make sure we produce value, whatever. I want that as well.
Right.
And I think it's important that we have these conversations. But for me, I think a big part of the value long term is just for us to have these conversations, especially in regards to kind of our pet idea, right, of bridging the gap between two polarized ideas, or even when we disagree, right, to be able to have the conversation to where we kind of bridge the gap and understand each other a little bit better. We gain some additional perspective, and it may not change my mind, but it provides more vision in my mind, right?
Yeah. More opportunity. I think even like you were sharing, did we get to that growth part of the difference between growth mindset? I think so too. And that's where but I think some of that is, as you were talking about that, it reminded me that I want to, of our differences, I guess is where, because this will be better based on the fact that you and I accept influence from one another, to where you are that person that will tend to want to add levity to some of the topics we discuss, making it fun and and it's still entertaining, still valuable, but fun, because fun has value as well.
Yeah. You probably also hate pumpkin spice lattes.
I just don't drink anything that's coffee related at all. So, I mean, there's just people that are just
that's
dropping.
How you know this is a miracle that we're doing this right now.
But still, I understand. There were definitely things from a construction world. There were definitely things that I didn't do that didn't fit in.
Yeah.
And drinking coffee was one of those. I'll let you fill in the blanks for the others, but just part of who I am didn't fit that model. But yet, here again, I think what's important is that you and I can bring that. And I think, we used the analogy last time, the being deep and still being able to have levity and come up, and recognize that that's probably part of our difference. Mm-hmm. And we used the analogy as far as like swimming underwater. Mm-hmm. I'm comfortable swimming underwater, and you're more comfortable as a bobber. I'm the weight, and
bring us back up.
But yeah, I want to come back up. And I think that's valuable as well. Mm-hmm. And it's good for me to be able to have that influence to say, okay, you don't have to stay under. You may want to, you can choose to, but at the same time, you can come up, take a break. And then we'll go back. And yet if I were being perfectly honest, it's like when I come up, my thoughts are that we'll never get back to that depth again. And and if that's where the work needs to be done at that depth, then my desire is to stay there. And I think I have to be open to the fact that it may be time for someone else to come up.
I think one thing that is fascinating to me, or I think you are good at holding your breath, right? Like you're good at staying down. And last time we talked about this, you said maybe some others are better at it than they think or whatever.
Sure.
But I also think as a counselor, like you are trained in that. You've practiced. You've held your breath longer and longer and longer. You've trained yourself to be able to stay there. But that is one of the things I appreciate about you is you enable the bobbing, right? And
sure.
And you talked about how that's a good balance to you, right? To bring some levity to some of that depth. And I would argue the same, which is even in our conversations outside of the podcast, sometimes it gets to the point where I got Bob or whatever, I tell a joke or whatever it is. And I see you're still down there holding your breath, saying, that's okay, take your time. Maybe you'll give a token, a little chuckle. I see some bubbles come up.
Yeah.
And I recognize in that moment, okay, all right, we're going to stay here, and I'll come back down. And I think there's value in that, too, like that balance of
I agree.
Not to leave the moment, like to come back to it and accept that, I don't know, just like... There's intimacy in those moments as well, where it's like, okay, we're doing this still. It's not too heavy for Mark.
I gotcha. What I'm saying? I do.
And so that's, for me personally, that's been refreshing as well. Because I think in my experience, and probably most people's yours, I mean, counseling maybe shifts it a little bit, but most people don't want to stay that deep that long. Like, Agreed. It gets very uncomfortable. You need to catch your breath, or maybe you're just tired of swimming,
Yeah.
And
Agreed.
so I think I even find myself sometimes, bobbing up saying, hey, do you need some air? Kind of thing. And with you, it's like, no, I'm good. I'm staying here. I'll wait for you. And it's like, okay, swim back down. Let's do this,
And I think that as we described that's the benefit of doing relationship with other people. Mm-hmm. Because I think we do, when we have these conversations, we learn it's like, okay, there is a different way to do it. Doesn't make what I'm doing wrong. It makes what I'm doing perfectly natural to me. Who doesn't want to breathe? Mm-hmm. We like to breathe on a consistent basis. But yeah, I can still hold my breath. And I think there's a lot of things like that where, we have a daily opportunity to challenge ourselves. Do we want to? Still your choice. Mm-hmm. Still your opportunity. Mm-hmm. But yet when we choose to, I think there is a growth that occurs. And I think that's part of what we do in this discussion is I can learn to say, okay, you don't have to stay at the bottom of the pool. Mm-hmm. And you're learning to say, okay, I can hold my breath just a little longer. Yeah. Not that you're not already mindful of that.
No, but you're right in the sense that our perspective, there's growth, right? Like to be able to say, okay, I can swim a little bit longer than I thought, and you to be able to say, actually, we can bob a couple times and still get right back down to that depth and not lose that, like that's forever lost or whatever.
Yeah.
I think there's growth in both directions, right?
Agreed. Yeah.
And hopefully that extends through the airway, this microphone into the internets, into someone's earbuds to where there's growth over there too, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the value part comes in as we grow. That's the part I'm hopeful for, right?
Sure.
That these conversations we have aren't just opportunities for you and I to grow and learn or whatever, but that they do extend into our listeners in one sense or another, because it broadens perspective, or it even, again, broadens the idea that you're different and that's okay.
Yeah.
And that explains some things about you that I can now deal with in a better way. I may not have to be like you.
Exactly.
But I can now look at you and go, oh yeah, he does that because of that. He does that because this is who he is. And accept that. And that's how crucial is that in relationships?
No doubt.
Relationships.
And I think that adds to that growth mindset, because I do believe, from my perspective, that no one's messed up. We're all operating perfectly normally based on where we've come from and what we've experienced.
Yeah.
So, the fact that you desire to bob is perfectly Justin, because that's how Justin grew up. He grew up with heavy things around him.
And
Go ahead.
Just, we talked about in the humor episode, we didn't get to some of the the science stuff that I read about it, like the book that I read that we mentioned in that podcast. But there's a lot of science to where you can actually enable people to swim longer if you let them bob up a couple times, right? Like it's like where levity, for me personally, has enabled me to swim longer, has enabled me to go deeper. Yeah. That balance, for me, again, personally, has enabled me to do more than I could have without it.
Sure.
And I think some of the depths that I've been able to swim are a direct result of being able to have some levity.
Give us an example, Justin.
Well, we talk about depression, or I can't remember if we recorded this part or not, but at some point we'll have an episode on depression, and that will be very serious, right?
It doesn't have to be, but yes.
Right, we can bring some levity to that, and I think for me, because the reason, a big part of that is I've dealt with depression. I work through depression. It's something that comes and goes in my life. And part of the tool set that I have is levity, is to look at it and say, this is, this isn't the end of the world. And to be able to step back from it when it's not in the middle of those episodes to say, it's a little bit funny how this happened, or that funny, or be able to bring some levity into it. And it enables me to be able to tackle it in a healthier manner, if that makes sense.
Sure.
I don't know. That's one example that I can think of. Or another example is again, you have the experience here, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but in a tense situation between husband and wife, sometimes a little joke can allow them to stay in that moment, right? And versus this is getting heated, this is, and we have to stop because we can't stay in this moment. We have to get out. We have to escape. We have to breathe, right? Where a little moment of humor between the two that says, that just a little twinkle in the eye can shift the moment to where they can say, okay, we can stay in this and keep working at it, right?
Yeah. But I think even in that, the twinkle in the eye is a break. You know what I mean? In that instantaneous moment, it is a break.
Something precedes the humor.
Yes, that basically says, okay, we're okay. I want you to be able to breathe, and I want to be able to breathe. And we can add some levity in this moment that says, okay, this too shall pass. In such a way that says, okay, we can take a break. And I think that's important to be able to recognize. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing from that from your side of the scenario, and I appreciate the yeah, it causes me to reflect on, okay, how am I bringing more seriousness to life, because that was part of our first podcast, was recognizing when I think first or second, but either one, it was about that aspect of I don't want my life or my kid, I sometimes take life too seriously,
Yeah.
especially where my kids were concerned early on. And I think, and this conversation has given me that as an opportunity to say, okay, yeah, it's okay to come up.
Yeah.
And yet balancing that with, okay, yeah, they're part of my occupation is that ability to stay in that moment. And yet am I offering opportunity for people to come back up as they need to, or is my influence, if you will, at that moment to say, okay, we got to stay down here. So yeah, that's just a, a thought for me to take away as a growth dynamic from today's podcast. Yeah.
And not just today. I mean, like you said, you've been. It's interesting to hear you say this. Similar things have been entering your mind in terms of your kids or whatever, or unless you're saying it's a result of our conversations. But yeah, I think. Yeah.
You go
That's
ahead.
all I have.
Go ahead if you want, by all means.
No, I just had a blank spot.
Oh, okay.
So contrary to what everyone thinks out there in the podcast world, like we don't script this.
You think they're gonna? Do you think they don't know?
No, I'm pretty sure they thought we did because we're so good at not saying or
We're still working on that. Let me tell you.
No, but we wrote those in. We just have to write fewer of them in the script.
Oh, is that
yeah?
What? Okay, I'm with you now.
No, so sometimes I draw a blank, and that just happened. But
so in this podcast, we had thought we'd wrapped up, but as we recognized in the whole process of things, we weren't quite done. And fortunately, Justin, in his wisdom, kept the mic rolling. So that's what we're continuing into at this point.
we don't have to talk like we're recording, but
no, I hear you.
Point, we might as well.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that as far as editing goes?
Yeah. So in regards to what I know,
like with the school issue, not the school issue,
editing
but
out poorly stated things.
Yeah, do we edit out poorly stated things?
I think it depends. And so another thing that I wanted, or that's been interesting since publishing,
sure,
is putting people's face in front of, like behind our microphone, right?
Yep.
Like,
exactly.
That person's, ears are involved or whatever. And so that's been good, really good.
Yeah, but I think it adds to that pressure as well. It
adds to pressure because then you think, oh, if I talk about this particular subject, that might be a sore spot for that person, or it might be triggering. And then I'm like, well, crap, I don't want to trigger people. I want this to be enlightening, not infuriating. And then, so I definitely went through a period, like a little episode of like worrying about like, oh, all I imagined this to be was fun and levity and growth and enlightenment. And then it occurred to me like, but we're still human and we'll still be stupid sometimes. Or maybe not you so much, Mark, but I know I'll put my foot in my mouth and...
But my unicorns and rainbows aren't everybody's unicorns and rainbows.
Right, that's true. But I can be completely generous towards your... I mean, like, I'll be like, people will understand. But when I say stuff, it's like, they won't understand, Mark.
Well, no, and that's where I'm at. I think that makes it interesting. I think it's good to include our wives, too.
Yeah.
I mean, but at the same time, there's a part of me that says, okay, we said it.
Yeah.
And... in that moment, it made sense.
Yeah.
And I think there's a context, and yes, might someone be offended? But I think we have to be able to recognize that, we could say unicorns and rainbows, and somebody could be offended.
Right. It's mythical.
Because it's left to interpretation. What do I mean by that? But does that not invite the further conversation? And here again, Lizzie brought up a great point. Who I forget the Kane lady's first name.
Christine
Kane. She was talking about it from that aspect of truth versus authenticity. And you follow me? And I think, in our day and age, authenticity says, well, that's just who I am, and you take me as I am, and da 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 da. And the truth part of that is, we accept who you are, but it doesn't mean that that's who you have to continue to be. And I think that's where offense, mercy, and truth. You follow me? Mm-hmm. I like what Jimmy does. What is it? Mercy without truth is like a cheerleader without a team, and truth without mercy is like operation without anesthesiology. That kind of thing. So I don't want to be, just all truth, but at the same time, I think you have to have that mercy and truth in such a way that's balanced and authentic. Mm-hmm. And challenges people.
Yeah. It also, we talked about integrity and duplicity.
Yeah.
And it made me think about how around certain people, again, certain faces come to mind as you see they like to post or maybe, commented saying, oh, I can't wait to listen or whatever it was, or approach you in church or whatever it is. And recognizing that as much as I value integrity and not having duplicity, there are some things that I would say in front of some people that I feel weird about saying in front of others, and recognizing there's still some duplicity there, right?
Yeah.
There's still some, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if, I think there's obviously value in discernment and what you say to some people versus others. I'm not saying that's not a thing, but also recognizing that that's important to have that integrity about what you believe, because what we're talking about isn't light stuff. I mean, this is stuff that we've come to believe, and to be willing to state that to anyone, whether it's, again, I talk about the church I grew up in a couple times in this podcast, and recognizing there might be someone from that church that listens because they know me from when I was young, and seeing that, there could potentially be some offensive things or things that I disagree with that I talk about, and just understanding for me that is important for them to understand who I am, have that integrity of this is the growth that I've achieved in my life, and here's how that came to be. And that's more important than not offending them, if that makes sense. But that's the balance I'm trying to learn, right? Those are things that I care about, that, I'm working on, figuring out the right thing to care about, if that makes sense.
No, and I think, when you shared that part about pressure, I think, when we have that, I'm not sure that's a beneficial thing. I think there's a responsibility, a stewardship, but I think there is something to be said for, the truth. As long as we're seeking that and to convey it, will be offensive at times.
Will also be offensive sometimes because we said something we shouldn't.
True. And I was, when you were saying that earlier, I was mindful of like Rush Limbaugh in the early days. He would just be offensive just for the sake of listenership.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's part of who he is. Who he was, I should say. But it's like, there again, what's our model going to be? What's our persona going to be? Are we desiring to be offensive for the sake of offensiveness, just to gain a listenership? That's not where I want to be.
Right.
But yet at the same time,
you're also very much in the camp of I don't want to gain leadership by not speaking the truth.
Yeah.
Right? Like by covering up for things that might be offensive. I don't want to increase our our listenership, our following, whatever.
Yes.
By covering those things up, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what I'm hearing.
Yep.
From you, and I'm
authenticity still.
Yeah.
Yeah. With truth.
And I think you talked about again authenticity. Authenticity is being real, and sometimes we're wrong when we're real, and that's. I think that's part of this too, is the growth of recognize, even in this podcast, to be able to say, hey, in this episode we said this, and I don't think I agree with that. I think I overstated that thing or whatever.
Yes.
I think we have an opportunity for an ongoing conversation and growth.
Yeah.
And so that's something, even in that particular issue, that I've been thinking a lot about, like, does it need to be edited out, or do we come back to it and say, in this particular thing, I probably overstated something or said it in an incorrect way.
And then in that, how soon do we do that? I guess would be the other thing in this model.
Right. It gets weird, right? Because
do we have to come to that? Does the next thing we record have to include that amendment, if you will, or that apology that says, hey, after listening to last week's, we had to record this one, because of that. So I think,
and we can also always inject snippets. I mean, that's the cool thing about editing episodes is we can record a 1-minute apology or whatever, and stick it at the front and say, before we get to the episode, Justin has to apologize again because he said another stupid thing.
No, and but I hear where you're coming from. We have that ability. And I guess that's where I'm wrestling with how we use it, when we use it, as we need to use it.
Yeah. Another thing I really like about one of the podcasts I listen to is they do the Armchair Expert. I've talked about that.
Yeah.
And for anyone who's listening to this podcast, I don't recommend that podcast unless you're
unless you're us and you want to get connected to another podcast.
Right.
No, I'm just joking.
But one of the things I like that they do is they do a quote unquote fact check at the end of every episode. So they have the episode, and the episode, they're celebrities. They interview celebrities mostly, and they'll have a conversation with them through the course of an hour or whatever. And then after they say, it's time for the fact check, and it's the part where, the co-host fact checks the person they interviewed, as well as most famously the other host, who's the celebrity. Basically saying, you said some more stupid stuff. Here's why you were wrong, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the intention was actual facts, but it's turned more into when we said that, it came off wrong. Or it's just it's one of my favorite parts of the podcast because it's the humanizing part, right? Where it's the two parts are humanizing, right? Because you see that mistake and you're like, well, I don't know if I said that. And then later for to hear them kind of go back and forth. And sometimes they have conversations like this, like you're saying, where should I have not said it? Because that's really what I think. And to not say it would have been a lie. I'm not saying what I think is right, but should we edit? The whole idea of editing things out.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting dynamic, and so I've thought about that too. Like, I wonder if that's a thing we could incorporate. How would that look? What about the length of the episodes? The kind of the back and forth. I haven't landed anywhere, but
I hear you.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is good
dynamic.
Yeah, it makes we're thinking more than we were.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
Yeah. And that's why I wanted to do this today. I was like, man, so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I'm gonna stop this.
Yep. That's test.
Is on. All right, you want to scoot forward?
I can.
Scoochie.
There you go. We're good. Did you want to redo or you want to test?
I can clip all this. Oh yeah, that might as well. Hey, thank you for listening to our podcast. If you like How I See It, please do all the things that podcasts tell you to do. Subscribe, rate, review, follow us, and or talk nicely about us on social media. If you want to reach out, the email is us@howiseeit.click. Yep, I said .click, as in .click. Please tell your friends about this show, and we'll see you on the next one.